Welcome to another in our series of webinars about Pires Investments PLC and its portfolio of companies that it's invested in. And I'm pleased to be here today with Darren Milne, who is founder and CEO of VividQ, and Kian Hughes from Shore Value Ventures. So Darren, be very interested to hear a bit about VividQ.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I hope I'll say a few interesting things along the way. So VividQ is a deep tech startup founded out of Cambridge by a team of PhDs out of Cambridge University and Oxford and St Andrews. And we set out on a singular mission to reshape the future of display, to take display technology from where it is now to where it really needs to be, into the fully 3D realm, but without the need for any eyewear or any of the associated stuff that you've experienced previously when you've tried on 3D TV or VR or any of these technologies. So we imagine a future where you could be sitting in your living room and you just say, Alexa, show me the Sahara Desert, and you're surrounded by it. Or put me in the Amazon jungle, and suddenly you're there. You're in a totally immersive environment where you're sat within a holographic representation of whatever scene you want. And you can expand this to other applications. Imagine you're in your car, and now as you're driving along, instead of having to look down at your dashboard to see your speed or your revs or anything like that, it's now cast out into the world around you, and not just that information, but also tracking where pedestrians are, making sure that they have hazard warning lights around them, or being able to show other cars in low light conditions like fog, so you can see a holographic representation of other objects when you can't see them yourself, or even go further. As I'm walking down the street, do I ever need to be actually holding one of these devices anymore in my hand? Could I, in fact, produce holograms in the real world around me such that I can just say into the world, Google, show me my Gmail, and it just pops up as a hologram in front of me without the need for me ever to carry a personal device again. This is our ultimate vision. So holographic display is the future of display technology, and our mission as VividQ is to power every single one of those future holographic devices that are now emerging. So why is holography the next critical display technology, the next thing that will revolutionize how we view information? Well, first of all, a hologram is a fully 3D representation. It is not using any of the typical tricks that augmented or virtual reality currently use in order to make a 3D-ish like image. It produces a real 3D image. And the reason for that is quite simple. So if we take an object, say like this cup, and if we wanted to make a perfect 3D image of that cup, the question is, how would I go about doing that? Well, when we're looking at this cup, what we're actually seeing is light coming in from sources, reflecting off the surface, and that reflected light making some complex pattern that then hits my eye, and then I interpret it as the cup. So if I wanted to make a perfect visual recreation of that, all I need to do is somehow figure out what that pattern of reflected light was, compute it, and then put that on a display and direct that towards the viewer's eyes, and then they will experience exactly the same light pattern that the cup created, and therefore see exactly the same object. And encoded into that pattern are all the 3D cues that you need in order to see everything from multiple angles, to be able to see the different depths. It will be a genuine 3D image, real holography, the way you saw in the movies like Star Wars, Star Trek, and so forth. And that is what we do. And the 3D effect is not the only advantage of this style technology. The designs can be made incredibly compact. So compared to traditional display designs, which are relatively bulky, these things can be made up to 80% smaller. So you can imagine very tiny projector systems that can be mounted in many places, say around your entire living room or on personal devices like mobile phones, so you can have holograms floating above your phone. They're extremely bright, which is a real problem for the display industry. So you know your mobile phone, as soon as you take it outside into sunlight, you can't see the screen. This is a particularly acute pain point for the in-car scenario, where you can have a heads-up display currently on your dashboard, but as soon as you've got the sun low in the sky shining straight through it, you can't see a thing anymore. So having a very bright display is a huge advantage. And you can make these things incredibly cost efficient, which is a nice little bonus, because a hologram is an incredibly useful data type in that one can alter it around optical systems. So for example, if I have a heads-up display in a car and it gets shaken around by the vibration and so forth, we can actually adapt for any shift in the optical components in the software layer, which means that we can correct for these imperfections without having to go and make extremely robust hardware that's costly to make. So beyond just the 3D effects and creating the ultimate immersive experience, the technology really has the potential to lower costs, make devices smaller, and make the visual experience better. So this all sounds great, I'm sure, but has it actually happened? And of course, the answer is yes. So here we just got a little cycling video of some holograms that we made in our office. So you can see here you have 2 holograms of some dinosaurs we placed in our office, and you can see as we refocus the camera, you see the different characters snap into focus, and this shows that this is a genuine 3D image, because this is the same as if you focus on your finger and the background goes kind of blurry. Compared to if you focus on the background, then your finger goes blurry. It's the same kind of effect. And you know this is a 3D image because you have that effect. And this is not possible to produce in current AR, VR, 3D TV, or any of the current 3D-like technologies. So we've already managed to build this. The VividQ product is in fact the software layer that does all the heavy compute of these things, because it turns out that doing this is incredibly complicated. So while holographic display is a concept that has been known now for around about 20 years. One of the major barriers to adoption was that you needed a supercomputer sitting in the corner to be able to compute these incredibly complex, dense light patterns. Now, not everyone has one of them at home, and even university labs would struggle to be able to do these things at any kind of speed. So the big innovation that VividQ had back in 2017, when we started the company, was a new set of algorithms that compute holograms in real time, so in a few milliseconds, on standard computing hardware and at high quality. So I can't emphasize enough the standard computing hardware. We run everything off of typical mid-level NVIDIA graphics processor units that you can find in your average laptop or desktop computer, and we're able to create these holograms in higher quality than has ever been seen before for that level of compute. So based on this, we started building out a software platform. So having some algorithms is great, but algorithms are not something you can sell easily. So we started building out an entire holographic infrastructure so that we could plug into any content platform. So for example, these dinosaurs come out of Unity 3D, which is a gaming platform, but we can also plug into things like Unreal, Skyrim, a whole host of 3D cameras, CAD systems. As long as it has 3D data, we can consume that data and compute a hologram from it. At the other end, we've left the software framework flexible enough that we can plug into multiple display devices. So again, the nice thing about holographic display, we don't need any specialist hardware. All the hardware you require is very much off the shelf. You can literally go online and buy all the components you need to make a holographic display. The critical missing piece was the software that can run it. And now we supply that to our partners and customers so they can go out and build these displays into whatever application they want. So VividQ supplies the software and IP that allows these OEMs, ODMs, and tier ones to go and create the holographic applications. And we disseminate our software as far and wide as possible so that they can get into as many applications as possible. Now, who is this team that has brought you this huge leap forward? Well, I mentioned at the start that we got our beginnings out of Cambridge University, and indeed I myself was a visiting researcher there, where I met several of the members of the optics team who were working specifically on holographic display there. So our CTO Anjay and one of our development managers SJ, they were doing PhDs and postdocs in Cambridge at the time. We quickly took on some mathematicians and some theoretical physicists in the form of Tom and Roman and myself, and together we developed the first working prototype of the software. And we were pretty stunned. In our first prototype, we had recognized that calculating holograms is very slow. We came up with an algorithm that we thought might work. We coded it up. And then our first test was we set up a 3D sensor, an Xbox sensor at one end of the lab. We had a holographic display we built at the other end of the lab, and we were able to wave into the Xbox Connect sensor and see ourselves as a hologram on the other side of the room. And this was all happening in real time, and that had never been demonstrated before. So it was extremely exciting. Based on that, we then thought, well, we could publish this. This is amazing. And then we had a second thought, which was, no, we could start a business based on this, because this is genuinely valuable, and this is a huge problem that we knew had never been solved before. So we kicked off the company in early 2017 with some investment from some local angel investors, and then we proceeded to start building out the software platform and secured our first customers about a year and a half later, who are a big Florida-based AR customer. So quickly, we realized that we wanted to very much become a business and not just a scientific research company. So we brought on Alexandra, who had been doing her degree in business studies at Cambridge, and so she came along and started creating our commercial plan. I obviously got more and more involved in that side as the company progressed, and so now we have a very strong commercial team backing up our team of PhDs based in Cambridge. And so we have over 45 combined years of experience in terms of sales, marketing, and biz dev on staff, and they've been phenomenally successful. So we've managed to crack into basically every big Silicon Valley tech company you can think of, and the Japanese automotive market and the Chinese automotive market now. So we're doing rather well on the commercials. So holographic display is something that could be used everywhere. It is something that can revolutionize the entire display industry, which in itself is valued about 211 billion. But one has to pick your targets. And while it would be great to go to Samsung right now and say, let's go build a holographic TV, that's technologically tricky, and convincing them to do that will take some time. There is lower hanging fruit where we're currently focusing our efforts, and that is within, first of all, the automotive industry for heads-up display. So to give this fully 3D heads-up display where you can see your navigation, safety, and information out in the road with you, which is great because that way the driver is concentrating on the road and seeing the holograms out there rather than focusing on his dashboard or on his windscreen. This in itself is a fast-growing market, currently worth around 1.1 billion, but projected to get to at least 2 billion in the next year. And more and more car companies are launching in on this. So you may have seen, for example, that BMW and Jaguar Land Rover already have basic heads-up displays in their cars, but they are just showing basic information because the technology stack they use really isn't flexible enough to allow for this full augmented version. Holographic display, for the reasons I mentioned, like compactness, brightness, and the full 3D effect, is the perfect technology to go to them. And so we've already secured 5 deals across the US, Europe, and Japan to create heads-up displays to the market, which we project will be hitting around about 2022, 2023. Our other side is in augmented reality. So augmented reality, smart glasses, for example, are one of the key consumer technologies we believe will absolutely change the face of consumer electronics in the next 2 or 3 years. By some estimates, they will replace entirely the needs for smartphones because you essentially have a smartphone on your face all the time, so you don't need to carry another device. And with market projections anything north of 150 billion total, it's a very big market to play in. So we are, again, our technology, because of its full 3D effect and the miniaturization opportunity, means that it's ideally suited for AR type applications. So both these industries are relatively undefined at the moment. They're both application areas that are looking for the right technology to come in and fill the gap, and ours seems to be absolutely ideal for both. Beyond this, of course, these really lay the groundwork to do much more ambitious things, to get into large area display, create that holodeck kind of experience that I talked about at the start, where I can turn your entire living room into a display, or in the end state, turn an entire city into a display. These are the first steps on that roadmap that we can start revenuing with quickly, and then build up our base so that we can then expand into those other applications. So here's what it looks like in terms of our development to date. So our initial scientific breakthrough was in Cambridge in 2016 with our first set of algorithms. I'm pleased to say that development, of course, has not stopped. We're now on our 4th generation of the algorithms. They're much faster, much higher quality, much better in all ways, and they're nicely encapsulated within a very robust software framework. So we can essentially deploy our software straight to an OEM or a partner. They can plug it into their hardware rig, and then they're up and running already. And we've done this with multiple partners. Of course, many of these guys are under NDA because they're big Silicon Valley tech companies. They don't necessarily like to talk about their community engagements, but the more public ones we can talk about are research partnerships like with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA obviously have a really strong interest in looking at the next big applications for compute, and specifically compute on their graphics processor units. Holographic display is an ideal candidate because it's massively parallelizable, and so they've really gone full steam ahead on doing research projects in this area with us, and are looking to actually use this as one of the key applications they use to be able to sell GPUs in the future. On the other side, we have the partnerships with more automotive-based companies. So we recently announced a partnership with True Life Optics, who are making optical systems essentially to be able to place in car. Again, these work ideally with our system, and that means we'll be able to make more hardware prototypes for heads-up display with them. And on the other side, we've been partnering up with display companies as well. So if we have compute, we have optics. The last part is how do we actually display the holograms themselves? And that requires very close integration with display companies. So for example, we're currently working with companies like Himax and Compound Photonics, who create the specific kind of displays that we require, and we're co-developing with them. The idea being that we get our software optimized on their hardware, they optimize their hardware with our software, and so we can create an entire integrated system. The end goal then being that we can take our compute partners, our optics partners, and the display partners as one bundle with our software and go to an OEM and say, here is a total solution. You don't need to do the thinking anymore. All you need to do now is take this complete ecosystem with partners with all the solutions packaged in one bundle and now integrate it into your product, whether that be AR smart glasses or heads-up display or something else if they have more ambitious plans. And so in that sense, even though we're just the software component in some sense, we provide the entire end-to-end system via our partners so that an OEM can easily integrate this technology into their products. And so we have been rather successful in that so far, and I'm glad to say we've signed up 5 large projects, 2 in the AR space, 3 in the automotive space. The 3 automotive projects obviously going towards heads-up display, and the AR one's going towards smart glasses. These will be carrying on throughout 2020. We expect the first phases of them to conclude in the latter half of this year. They have been, of course, a little delayed in some cases by the COVID situation, but on the whole, we're somewhat insulated from that because being a software company primarily, we're not that's not that much of a hurdle for us. But some of the hardware aspects with the partner companies, of course, have seen a little bit of a hold up. So in terms of revenues, then we're aiming to do around about 1.5 to 2 million this year, just based on those initial projects. That scales rather quickly. Next year up to several millions, and then the royalty model kicks in. So the idea then is once we're past these phases, they then license the software en masse on a per unit royalty model. So for every HUD, for every pair of smart glasses, VividQ extracts a small royalty payment. Now, when you look at the number of AR glasses projected to be in the world, even taking a couple of dollars per unit equals hundreds of millions of revenue as soon as one of those products goes mass market. So I think that just about concludes my presentation. So we always like to sign off with our tagline. The world isn't flat, but your displays still are, and we're on a mission to change that. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Darren. That's really great. Great overview of the company. One piece of interesting news that I heard recently is that 2 of your team have been included in the Forbes 30 under 30 for 2020. Tell us about that.
Yes, so Alexandra and Tom have been named in the Forbes 30 under 30. So they're in the technology section of the European side. So yeah, they've done very well. Essentially, off the back of the success of the company raising funding from our current investors, including Sure Valley, we got a bit of recognition, and the Forbes people, of course, were interested to see who the people were that had made this happen. And so Tom and Alex, they're our two under 30 co-founders. And so they made the application and got access to that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the events they were scheduled to go to have now been delayed significantly.
That's true.
But still, it's great to have a couple of co-founders get that kind of recognition. It really shows that what we're doing really does capture the imagination of people, from the really heavy tech guys all the way up to journalists and your average consumer. And it really is like a technology that will fundamentally change how everyone interacts with display. Because I didn't even go into necessarily, the future where, you can have your Minority Report style thing where you have your hologram, you have a virtual desktop. We wouldn't need to look at a screen. Everything would just float above a panel, and then you'd have haptic control where you could just reach in and touch icons and so forth. I mean, once we have that technology built out, then everything will look very different. And I think for the Forbes committee, that's a very persuasive vision. That's something they really see making a fundamental shift in the world.
Yeah, the company's won some great awards as well over the last while. You've been very successful in awards.
That's true, yes. So I guess a couple of big notable ones recently were we won the KPMG Innovation Award. So we were named the most innovative startup in Britain by KPMG, which was great. And just before Christmas, we won the Tech Tour Award in the software space. So that's a huge European award where a committee of investors basically decide on what the most promising companies are. Previous to that, we had got to the finals of Jumpstarter, which is a Hong Kong-based award. Again, we were supposed to be in Hong Kong for the final, but it all hit at a rather unfortunate time. So yeah, we've done rather well on the awards thing. Again, it's technology that really captures the imagination. It is one of those once in 20 years kinds of inventions. And it's just our job now to make sure it actually happens.
Yeah, you mentioned investors earlier on as well. You've got, as well as Sure Valley Ventures, you've also got two quite large VCs. How do you think they will help open up markets for you?
Well, yeah, so the other two VCs are Flux Unit, which are Osram's venture arm. And obviously, Osram is in itself a huge company. It's an incredibly important strategic for us, especially in the automotive space. So they do a lot of the supply of components and modular systems into the automotive tier ones. And so we've already begun the process of securing deals within Osram such that we can get our software included in those bundles so that we can sell through them into the tier ones. And just having that network into European automotive itself is extremely handy. The other fund, UTech, the University of Tokyo's Edge Capital, I think they were named #1 in the Midas list last year for Japan. So they're a very good fund. And they again have been instrumental in introducing us to Japanese automotive and Japanese consumer electronics as well. So they're extremely well connected, and they basically, as soon as the investment documentation was signed, they'd already arranged 5 or 6 meetings for us in Japan in order to start negotiations for projects. And I'm very glad to say that already 2 of those are converting, and they're turning into 2 very large auto deals for us in Japan.
That's fantastic, Darren. Thanks very much. That's a great overview of the company.
Yeah, so Darren, thank you for what's been a fascinating insight into VividQ. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for your time.